Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown, where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness, where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. And good evening once again, and welcome to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willie Hassell, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And she is the lovely, she is the mystical, she is the mysterious, and sometimes she is confused with the Christmas elf. she is Lynn Nickerson. Good evening, Lynn.
Good evening, Willie. I think it's something like a split personality. I'm not sure, though.
Is that what it is? Split personality. Ooh.
But she does come from the North Pole.
Yeah, she comes from the North Pole. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes you dress like you come from the North Pole.
Yeah. It's very cold around here.
All bundled up.
Well, it is freezing tonight.
It is. It is freezing, and I don't like it. So,
no.
You know what I'm going to do?
I bet you're going to introduce our guest.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce our guest for tonight, and his name is Fritz Zimmerman, and he is a graduate of Purdue's Communication College, and what began as a desire to produce a short documentary on the mound builders of the Ohio Valley has led to many years of researching and writing about America's prehistory, with an emphasis on the migration of the Holy Land's Amorites, who became America's mound builders. Fritz's years of research produced the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, and its companion piece, the Nephilim
Chronicles.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A travel guide to the ancient ruins in the Ohio Valley, which includes numerous photos and driving instructions to the mounds and the earthworks that can be visited from public places. Fritz's intriguing works can also be frequently found in the Ancient American magazine. So good evening, Fritz. Welcome to Spirit Radio.
Hi, Fritz.
Good evening. Good to be with you.
Great to have you on. So thanks for taking us on such a short notice. We had somebody cancel.
Not a problem. I've done a few of these, kind of the Christmas rush.
Oh, really?
The Christmas rush, huh?
We got to get the word out.
Yeah.
Well, now that you're an independent researcher and an antiquities preservationist, I'd conclude that getting this information out is very important to you. It's been really glossed over, and it's been kept from the public. So both Willie and I are eager to discuss all this secrecy and its implications, especially about the giant skeletons in the Ohio Valley. So let me say, because of the short lead time, neither of us have had a chance to read either of your books, and we apologize for that, but we did do quite a bit of research with what was available on the internet and the links that, of course, Mark sent us. Just really fascinating stuff. So I would like you to start with perhaps what got you involved with this and what started revealing itself to you regarding, you started with a documentary, or you thought you were?
Well, I did. I was in television, before all this started. So, even worked as a weatherman for a CBS affiliate for a while. So.
Great.
Oh.
But left doing that, and I was doing some independent videos for television, and my partner left, and so I have 2 degrees from I have one in communications. I have one from history. But even though I have a college degree in history from a major university, I didn't know anything about these burial mounds.
A lot of people
and
don't.
I was just floored when somebody said, well, yeah, there's some, they're around Indiana here. And I started looking in county histories and, finding Noble County North, there's like 35 or 40 of them at one time. And well, this is just unknown. I can't believe something's 2,000, 2,500 years old, and nobody knows about it. And so it started. And just so happens where I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we have the second largest genealogical library. So
Ooh.
I have county histories from just about every county from every state in the U.S.
Amazing.
So unlimited. So once I started going and looking for mounds around Indiana, and I found a few large skeletons, kind of expanded the search, found more. Next thing you know, 11 years have passed. I visited over 700 mound sites, photographed 222. 222 have gone through about 8,000 to 10,000 different historical documents and books to come up with over 300 of the giant skeletons. So
wow.
time flies when you're having a good time.
That's a lot of documents. Can I ask, we're a little bit unclear. Did you ever get the documentary finished, or did you change gears and write the book instead?
No, I made a book instead because it became so big.
Wow.
There was so much out there. There were so many giants. There were so many mounds. Then the story began to unfold of, I had the list of giants in 2007, 2008. But figuring out who these people were was another 6 years.
Really?
So then I start finding out, the skull types, and I start finding the geometry, and the sacred geometry matches up with that of the biblical Amorites in Babylon. And I find a numerical codex called Gematria, where sun temples were 666 feet in circumference in the Ohio Valley. Squares, which is symbolic for the Earth Mother, were 1080. 1080 was the number used by the Amorites, the Babylonian Amorites. And there were all these numbers and geometry and the skull types and the burial types and burial mounds with circles on them. Then we have hinges, and a hinge is a circular earthwork with an outer wall, interior ditch with a gateway aligned to a solar event. We have those in England. We have those over here. And then the similarities was just too much to
Amazing.
say these are the same people. They have to be the same people. All of this could not have happened independently, serendipitously in the U.S., and we're talking about the same people. So that's the big story. And then of who these people are. Of course, that's politically incorrect, so I'm getting a little bit of buffer on that. But, I'd really like to talk about the burial mounds because I know
Great.
Your audience is paranormal, and there is a major aspect of paranormal within these burial mounds.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's go in that direction then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, a burial mound, of course, contains bodies, and the religion of the mound builders and these ancients was ancestral worship. They worshiped their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And once they would place them in the mound, either, their bodies being in there, sometimes they were cremated, they were no longer seen as an individual, but they were seen as part of a collective of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
So they would go to the burial mounds and ask their forefathers for, good luck and, for a good life. And so there's a religion behind the burial mound themselves. And then if we take the burial mound and the giants and we link them to the Book of Enoch and we link them to the stories of, who the Nephilim were, their spirits were confined to earth in the Bible. And it's interesting that that confinement is exactly what they practiced, and that being that they didn't believe those spirits went off to heaven. They believed the spirits were right here.
Why?
They were right there where those burial mounds are. And they truly are the source of so much paranormal activity. And because it seems to be politically incorrect to say, like, oh my gosh, this place is so haunted, like Moundsville Prison that has the largest burial mound in the Ohio Valley of 70 foot, right in front of it, that seems to be a little, politically incorrect to point that out. Not to mention that the man in the burial mound in front of Moundsville Prison was over 8 foot, and his wife was about 8 foot also. So
Yeah,
two
read
very
that.
large people in a burial mound in what could be considered one of the most haunted places in America. And
Yeah.
why is that? Because that burial mound is a giant portal.
Really?
And you know all about that, the doors.
Mm.
Well, every one of these burial mounds is a door. And I watch a lot of paranormal shows. I'm really hooked on Dead Files and Ghost Adventures and My Ghost Story and Paranormal Experience. I watch them all, and it's so surprising because, I have such a knowledge of where all the burial mounds are, of how many times they'll be someplace and go, oh, yeah, there were giants found there, there's burial mounds around there, and to say that, I think those two are connected, that burial mounds are doors, and just so happens, that, people are having all this activity in a place where there at one time was a lot of burial mounds.
They say the same thing about the stone chambers, that they feel those are portals as well.
Yes, and, the bodies are long gone from those, but those were burials, and it was basically the predecessor of, the burial mounds that we have, in the Ohio Valley. We do have burial mounds that have stone chambers within them. But we're looking at the megalithic area around 2700 BC, where we're looking maybe like 1,000 years later of what's being built in the Ohio Valley. So there are some changes, but basically the same thing, getting away from more of the stone and just going straight with earth or wooden coffins. So,
Even wooden coffins, Fritz? Wooden coffins?
Yeah, they were wooden. There are stone chambers with keystones, beehive chambers, almost everything you would find in the British Isles. Doorway lintels.
Yeah.
The doorway lintels themselves are for the egress of spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And we have fairies associated with the burial mounds, sightings of fairies, stories of fairies, Native American legends about the fairies. Of course, fairies, I don't know what your take is. From what I find is that those are basically ghostly apparitions, that this is how they manifest as these small beings.
And then what about the dwarfs? You wrote about the dwarfs as well.
Well, there's a dwarf race. So we have a lot of accounts of these 3-foot people, and it's really, in the next book, I don't want to get my next book coming out. I won't talk about that right now, but quite a few cases of them finding, not just one or two, but whole graveyards of literally thousands of these really small people. But, I don't think those should be confused with spiritual manifestations that have been sighted around the burial mounds.
Well, can you tell us some of them? This paranormal manifestations that you've experienced or heard about?
Yeah, I know. I read in one of your papers that you've heard disembodied voices and seen shadow figures and.
Yeah, Fort Hill in Ohio. It's a big serpentine hilltop earthwork, and looking at the. They were behind trees, and just out of your periphery, they would just kind of look behind the tree, just to kind of look at you, and you glance over there, and you could see them quickly, like, go right back behind the tree.
I've heard that.
And, when you're in remote Ohio on top of a hill that there's just nobody around, you're up there by yourself, it is a little bit unnerving, but
it is unnerving.
You got to get those photos. So, like, okay, I got the photos, I'm going to head back down.
Get out of here.
Yeah, whatever it takes, right?
Whatever it takes. So, I saw that, and then when I was at Gallipolis, Ohio, and I was photographing a mound on a bluff, and this is across from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where all the
Mothman stuff is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and when I was there, I was looking out, and I saw the bridge, and I didn't know anything about Mothman at the time, and it was just such a beautiful vista. I stopped and I took a photo, and a voice just as clear as a bell, right in front of me, said, "Nice evening, isn't it?"
Oh my gosh.
And, looked around, and, I was way up on this bluff, and it's a relatively small graveyard up there, and kind of looked around, and of course there wasn't anybody else up there, and kind of dismissed it as, maybe, the noise traveled up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
It was getting late in the evening, and it was very calm. It's like, well, sometimes sound travels. So,
That's right.
Maybe that was it. And got in the car to leave and was to take a right, which is a pretty steep incline to go back down to the bottom of this bluff, and my car wheel turned to the left, and I missed the turn. So I drove the short distance back around the cemetery, and kind of was looking ahead because I thought maybe my tire had hit a hole or something, and it just kind of
yanked it
left.
Yeah.
But I kind of came up there and I don't see any holes or anything. And about then I was about ready to turn, and I didn't have that hard of a grip on the steering wheel, and it just turned in my hand.
Oh, jeez.
And back around I went.
So what was the point, do you suppose? Were you supposed to see something?
It was just a really weird day. Weird things happened to the car. Things that, it had never done before. It never done it afterwards, but it was just
odd happenings.
Just bad mojo for exactly 24 hours. I had made my way over to Richmond after being in Charleston. I went to Charleston, West Virginia. Interestingly enough, there was a hinge there that was 666 feet in circumference.
Really?
I left there, and I was heading to south of Richmond, Kentucky, going to another site where there was a hinge 666 feet in circumference, and those were the three main ones. And it was just bad mojo for a day. And, the car was kicking out, and it wasn't running, and I was barely making it up these hills, in Kentucky because it's so hilly around there, and really didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have that much money on me. The car was dying. Really hated to call a friend and say, I'm about 6 hours south.
Can you come and get me? Oh, that's creepy.
Apparently something didn't want you investigating these places.
Didn't want you there.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always thought that, they did want me to investigate them because I'm the only person out there that wants to preserve them and really tell the true story. But, I think when you're dealing with some sort of demonic force, whether you're doing good or evil doesn't really matter.
Do you think that it was
that's
sort of evil?
What I took as, I just figured it was some sort of demonic that attached to me, but it just left exactly right when the day was ending. It was about
at dusk.
And then all of a sudden the car started running fine. I made it back fine.
So you never did have to call the tow truck.
That's good.
Never had to call the tow truck, never had to call a friend or anything like that. But it was just a real darkness for a day of, my travels and the car and everything else. But
was that about your only experience with feeling negativity around any of these mounds or vicinity like that?
Yes. Yeah,
that's good.
The mounds themselves,
no.
I've never felt anything really negative with those. What was interesting, and I have not done this, but I was with Wayne May, who's the publisher of Ancient American Magazine, and we went to some earthworks south of Newark, Ohio, called the Yost Works. And they've been plowed over for years, and there's a guy that has done years of research with this earthwork complex and that, and he wanted to see if Wayne May, with divining rods, could find where the walls were at one time.
Oh.
And it was real interesting because Wayne did go all across, this massive earthwork and was like, all right, there's an earthwork running here. Here I passed one. I just passed a burial. But he was able to mark this whole thing out with divining rods. So these things are still emitting energy, even though in some spots they've been plowed over.
Do you think it's due to the stone underneath the surface? Or do you just think it's earth energy?
I just think it's the spirit energy attached to these areas that were built, as ceremonial areas. And especially with the burial mounds. There is an evident energy just to stand next to one.
Really?
So if you are sensitive at all, you'll feel it. You'll feel it. You'll get goosebumps. You'll feel a definite resonance coming off of these.
Yeah, I'd like to visit one. I know you've got that book that we'd just love to get a hold of. All right then, Fritz. The people in these mounds. First of all, have you seen one of the mounds open? Have you seen the skeletal remains in situ? Are there any where you can view them in situ, or are all the bones taken that aren't dug up?
Yeah, just to see a mound opened up, no. But you have to realize that Native Americans have are part of NAGPRA, or the laws are part of NAGPRA. So no, you can't dig into a mound. An archaeologist can destroy a mound, take the skeletons out, but they're not going to allow you to be a witness to what they do.
I didn't know if there was like some kind of a national park set up so that people could go and see this.
Yeah, you can see the mounds, but no, certainly can't dig into them. And
there are none that have been dug that are on display.
No.
No. Okay.
It's opened up where you can look down into the skeletons. No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. That's.
Then, have you personally seen the bones yourself?
No.
Oh, just pictures of them then?
Pictures, eyewitness accounts. That the Smithsonian around the turn of the century in the late 1800s went to about 100 different places where it had been reported where a large skeleton had been removed from a burial mound, and they took them. And after that, nobody ever saw them again.
They lose them. They take them and they lose them.
Well, why do you
terrible
think that,
filing system?
Yeah, why do you think that is? That whenever these skeletons go to the Smithsonian, they just disappear?
I have my opinion on that, but what do you think, Fritz?
Well, the head of the Smithsonian at the time was sympathetic to Native Americans, and there was evidence that there had been migrations here of other people, and he wanted to squash that. And so part of the Smithsonian was to go out and retrieve any evidence that there was any other migrations other than Native Americans being here. That would lead to the Beringia theory that Americas were populated the end of the Ice Age across the Beringia land bridge, and then that was it. And nobody came here until 1492. So the Smithsonian was real integral in squashing any evidence, and then that was taken over by university archaeologists who embraced Beringia, and then they too have found evidence, and then it's either destroyed, hidden, or just not made public.
Well, was the public claim then that all Native Americans, they used to be giants and then they just got shorter in stature over the years? Is that what they were telling the public?
No, they just said the giants never existed.
Oh.
Every account was a hoax.
Real?
Even though the Smithsonian agents that were in the field doing some of these digs found and reported skeletons that were over 8 foot.
Right.
So it's really a matter of timing of when they printed it and then when they said, no more. Anything large, anything that would be 8 foot would be described as large. And that's it. So,
what is the tallest skeleton that you have heard of?
What, in these mounds?
In Muskegon County, Ohio, they dug into a mound and they found, I believe it was 5 skeletons that were all around 9.5 foot. And what's interesting is they had a document, and this was printed in their county history. And you got to realize in the 1800s, when certainly farming was your prominent citizens, a lot of them were farmers. Of course, there were businessmen. But when they came in and did a county history, that book was mainly for prominent citizens. It was an expensive book, and, they would have the bibliographies, and the bibliographies would be of prominent farmers and prominent businessmen within the county. And they published this, and there were 5 people that witnessed it, and they had somebody that, they all signed a document that this is exactly what they had found, that these had been measured. They were all over 9 foot. We here undersigned, witnessed by some other guy that was part of the city government, signed this document that, so future generations would have no doubt. It's like, no, we all saw it, and this guy witnessed it, and we all signed this photo or this document that this, in fact, was true. And then with those skeletons, there was a tablet that was had kind of some Greek characters, but mainly it was Hebrew that they had deciphered and sent to some experts and some things of, exactly what this thing had said. And interestingly enough, it started as I am the Alpha and I am the Omega.
Really?
So, very Hebrew, very kind of biblical start to this tablet that was within this burial mound where these giants were found.
But it was found to be block Hebrew, wasn't it?
Well, now the block Hebrew is the Newark tablet, and that was found in a stone mound that was 70 foot high.
Oh.
If you can imagine stone, white stone being 70 foot, how that would have looked,
Magnificent.
on the landscape. There was a large skeleton in the bottom of this, and then with him was it's kind of like a box, about 8-9 inches long. I've seen a replica of it, a perfect replica of it. And then around that was Hebrew. And what's interesting is, immediately, of course, it said, "Oh, this is a hoax." Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that the script was block Hebrew, and they didn't even discover what block Hebrew was until 20 years after this box was found. So it could not possibly be in a hoax because nobody even knew what block Hebrew was. They knew it was a form of Hebrew, but this earlier version of Hebrew called block Hebrew had not even been discovered yet.
That is incredible. All right, well, we are now at the bottom of the hour. When we come back, Fritz, I'd like to get into who you think these giants are and your defense of your argument. I find it very interesting. So if you can hang on for just a couple of minutes, and we'll be back shortly.
You are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, on WSCALP 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we will be right back after this short break. Supernatural Magazine, the UK's newest paranormal magazine, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com.
The video portion of Spirit Radio, The Paranormal Experience, is sponsored by Spirit Chasers Paranormal, a paranormal investigation and research organization in Northampton, New Hampshire. Professional, respectful, courteous. Check us out at spiritchasersparanormal.com or email Willie at spiritchasersparanormal.com.
Welcome back to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth West End. And we have a little announcement here from the community calendar, but the light is glaring on it, so I can't see it. Okay, from the City of Portsmouth Community Newsletter, the Senior Services Office of Portsmouth City Hall hosts tea and cookies on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., where seniors can share ideas about seniors in Portsmouth. Outside of regular office hours, appointments, and personal visits can also be made by contacting Bryn Chute, that's C-H-U-T-E, Senior Services Coordinator at 603-247-9531, or by email at bchute@cityofportsmouth.com. And let's see, next week we are going to take the night off. This will be the first time in, it's 14 months now.
Yeah.
This will be the first night that we're actually going to take the night
We're going
off.
to take a break.
Going to take a little break.
We haven't decided what we're going to do, if we're going to run a show or if we're going to just play some weird music.
That's an idea. We can just come in and play some weird music or something. But anyway, since we're not going to be here, we want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays.
To everyone.
To everyone.
All of our listeners.
To all of our listeners and all of those who will be listeners sooner or later.
That's right, our future listeners.
That's right.
And let me see, that's for the 20th, our 20th show. For the December 27th. And then on January 3rd, this is our upcoming guest list, we're welcoming Merrill Fankhauser to Spirit Radio, and this is going to be his first appearance. And he studied extensively what he believes to be an undersea base off of the coast of Malibu, California. January 10th, we're welcoming Bob and Betty Luca. And Betty was better known as Betty Andreessen in the Andreessen Affair, written by Raymond E. Fowler. And they're going to be our guests, and they're going to be discussing the Andreessen Affair. And actually, both Bob and Betty have been involved with extraterrestrial contact. I've read 3 of Ray Fowler's books, and they're all excellent, including the Andreessen Affair. That's going to be a different kind of a show. It'll be quite interesting. And we didn't bring in our book for the rest of the our future guests, so we'll keep you guessing.
I forgot to bring the book, so that's my fault. Blame it on me. So anyways, why don't we now go back to tonight's guest on the phone, Fritz Zimmerman. Welcome back, Fritz.
Welcome back, Fritz.
Thank you.
Thanks for being so patient. I guess everybody has a bottom of the hour break, though. I've been listening to other shows, and they do the same thing. Okay, so I know who you think these people are. What I would like to know first, before you announce who they think they are, have they done any kind of DNA tests on these bones to know?
Yes. Yes, they have. And what shows up is something called haplo-X.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been traced back to the Sea of Galilee. And the Amorites lived from the Sea of Galilee and up and down the Jordan River. And so we know that's where they originated. And there's some controversy, and of course, archaeologists are going to hold on to that Beringia theory. And they're saying, well, that haplo-X dates 20,000 BC, but there's a man named Yates who has been doing the studies on that, and he said, no, it's more like 2,500 BC or 2,000 BC, which would line up perfectly with the Bronze Age traffic that they were coming over here initially to extract the bronze or the copper out of Isle St. Royal up in Lake Superior. And the Amorites, the accounted giants in the Bible, were associated with making weapons and metallurgy and trading copper and amber and a bunch of other things, but they were spreading across Europe looking for these minerals. And if you look at who archaeologists call the copper culture, which is up there in Minnesota and Wisconsin, you will find that they have Kang daggers, and that's just kind of a spearhead with a long tail coming out of it. But then they sequence from that to the socket. And the socket was developed around 1700 BC, which was revolutionary. The socket you have in your shovel and your mop and everything else was just a revolutionary invention. And we find that the spearheads have midribs, but everything in the copper culture is identical to state-of-the-art weapons technology that we're finding in the Middle East at the exact same time.
At the same time.
And it's just the elephant in the room as far as research goes. And, professionals won't debate me on it because you can't dismiss that. It's like, are you kidding? We went from Stone Age to state-of-the-art weapons manufacturing with this copper culture, and you're telling me that, again, this just happened spontaneously or serendipitously over here, and then mysteriously just disappeared. There's something like 50,000 tons of copper that they can't account for. Where did it go?
And,
so,
the Amorites would have an easy access going from the Mediterranean to the Gulf of Mexico, then up the Mississippi River. It's very plausible.
That or the northern route. And, yeah, they were coming up and down the Mississippi. We have, and I have in Fallen Angels, a thing on metals of different things, of ancient lead mines that they found over here, canals that were connecting parts of the Mississippi River.
That could accommodate ships.
Well, the Amorites were known for building canals.
That's
and now
amazing.
here's when we have canals. We have them up at the Rock River. We have them along the Mississippi. We have them along that trade route down the Mississippi if they were going that way.
So they've got all of this copper that they can't account for. I mean, there are evidently sort of mines that have been, chiseled out, and they don't know where all this stuff went.
No, they can't account for it, and it's certainly not in the burial mounds. They'll have like a ceremonial axe or something like that, or maybe something small, but certainly not the amount of copper that was mined out of there. There's just thousands of mines. And in some of them, and one that I document in the book, it was a piece of copper that was 5 tons, and they were moving it up, to extract this. Well, they're not moving 5 tons to make earrings or bracelets. I mean, they needed a lot of copper to get that. I mean, they needed a lot to go after 5 tons.
I was just going to say the number they mentioned was like 500 million tons of copper have been removed that they can't account for. Wasn't that the number?
Yeah.
Over the course of time?
Yeah, where did it go?
Where did it go?
Where did it go? Now, they have found Egyptian bowls that, copper in Lake Superior was so important. One, because the Mideast mines, those were soon depleted. And the copper was in a bunch of other stone, and you had to cook it, and you had, it was difficult to get. There was European copper mines, but that wasn't the best quality either. But in Isle St. Royal, it was 99.9% pure, but the only impurity had little tiny specks of silver in it. Mm-hmm. And that's how you could tell if it was Isle St. Royal, because it would be copper, and you'd see a little tiny specks of this silver. Now, what's interesting is that over here we have the copper, and to make bronze, and of course this is the Bronze Age, you need tin, and you need copper. Mm-hmm. Well, in England, not that far southwest of Stonehenge, is where they were mining the tin, and we have hinges and mounds and giants. Over here we have the copper, and we have hinges, we have mounds, and we have giants. So they were here pulling that out. So they left, their religion, their hinges, their burial mounds, and their large skeletons, just like they did in England. I have in the book about 15 cases of large skeletons being found in the south of England and Scotland.
Really?
Yeah, that was another thing that I had access to. I had access to about every ancient county history. Some of these books were like from the 1700s in the library here. And again, so I had access to information that most would not have. And so was able to put together, it's like, okay, the skeletons over there were equally as large. And then there's a guy named Coons who wrote about these Beaker people who built Stonehenge, and there were 3 distinct skull types of Dinaric and Borrby and corded people, but distinct skull types, more Upper Paleolithic, Cro-Magnon almost looking. Mm-hmm. All 3 of those skull types show up in the burial mounds in the Ohio Valley.
Do they?
And they're so distinct. One, the Dinaric, you would possibly recognize as more of a Peruvian-looking skull.
I saw that.
Where the back of it's flattened.
And it's cone-shaped, right?
And kind of cone-shaped, yeah, it goes straight up. Now, actually, they found a skull like that was described as massive at the gates of Damascus in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And then they found a couple around the Black Sea. And actually, in the 1800s, the first thought was that somebody went to Peru, had skeletons, lost them, and then somebody refound them, if you can believe that. But then eventually they kept finding them and go, oh, no, this is a distinct people that we found. And then they found them, you know, and started documenting them in the burial mounds around Stonehenge in the south of England. And they're identical to what they find in Ohio. But, you know, an archaeologist isn't going to put those two dots together because, you know, that's career suicide for them. But I have photos of the skull types in the book, and it's pretty remarkable that you can look at those and see it's like, oh, yeah, those are identical.
Well, let me ask you.
Even the fact that the corded people had an occipital bun,
mm-hmm.
which you would generally associate with more of a Neanderthal-type skull, and these corded had that, and then I show pictures of those corded that they found in Europe and in England, and then some in the Ohio Valley. And again, a skull type that is so distinct to have an occipital bun and more of an upper Paleolithic Cro-Magnon type facial features that there's just no doubt they're identical, along with large size conical burial mounds and being around hinges. So the evidence is there. And I like to think that that is what this book is. It really offers you the evidence of, like, well, here's what we have, and this is what I have to substantiate of saying that these are the same. So,
let me ask you, though, Fritz, you're talking about 3 different skull types, and yet you think they're all Amorites, or is it sort of a descendants thing?
No, they were just 3 different, you know, it was more of a race, but it had distinct people within it.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to grasp that, but yeah, they were the same, but somewhat distinct, but generally the same. I also have in the book that about 10, 12 accounts of Cro-Magnon skeletons that they found, mm-hmm. and all of those were large. You know, up over 7 foot.
Was it like intermarriage type thing?
If we want to get that genetic stuff,
mm-hmm.
we're going to get our giants in the Bible and our giants in England and our giants in the Ohio Valley. That's where they came from. So there was some diversity, but they were all part of the same group that was traveling together. And the Bible kind of spells that out because they tell of all the different tribes that were giants. Mm-hmm. There were the Emin and the Zanzuman and the Amorites.
Oh, all right.
You know, there were numerous groups of these giants. So they weren't all lumped into just one group.
Then what about Nephilim or Nephilim? Then who specifically were they? Or were they all 3 of those groups?
Yeah, it's just a general heading of everybody. So Nephilim will translate as the giants.
Okay.
But it's more of a biblical take of giants.
Yeah.
And then that has to do also with, in the book of Enoch it says, and the story there is that you had the angels, and they came down and they mated with women, and then these giants was the result of that. And these angels shared the secrets of God with these people. And they showed them, 1, the making of metals. So we've already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Mathematics. The Amorites actually were the people that developed advanced mathematics of pi and square root and all that.
And handed it to the Greeks.
We find in the earthworks in the Ohio Valley, they knew that.
Yeah.
From the measurements, it's evident they knew pi and they knew square root, and they were playing around with numbers. The Nephilim were taught geometry. They were taught the course of the moon. Of course, we have earthworks in England and in Ohio that were tracking the 18-year course of the moon, tracking the sun. So we can look at that list of those secrets, and we find all of that in the Ohio Valley. We find all of that within the earthworks over in England.
Yeah, and why don't you mention the measurements that you took and the alignments? That there's some.
Well, now I didn't take these measurements.
Well,
these were done by Squire and Davis in 1848 when all of the earthworks were still intact, and these were professional surveyors.
Mm-hmm.
And the hinges were either 660 or 666 feet in circumference, and then these squares were all 1080. And then we have a couple hinges that were actually 555 feet. And if you take 555.5, and I think you stretch it way out, and you times that by pi, you get 1746, which is the sum total of 666 plus 1080. Now, the importance of that is because we have circles and squares. The religion of the mound builders was all about balance. Mm-hmm. So you wanted the sun and the earth mother to always be even. So we have earthworks in the Ohio Valley where there's a circle attached to a square, and we're talking a circle and square like 1,000 feet across. But they were of equal areas. Well, to have a circle and a square, their equal areas is called a square circle. And again, you have to have advanced mathematics to pull that off.
Yeah.
But the religious aspect of that is that they were the same, that it was the balance of power. People would know that as the yin-yang, the balance. So you have two things, but they're identical.
And that would be their sacred area.
That was a sacred area, and then, but they, would report that. So there you have the symbolism of the circle and the square, but then you also have the mathematics, and then you have those areas that are the same, because in everything in the religion, and if you go to the earthworks and try to point this out of, what to look for on the sacred landscape and, what was being represented, both symbolism and what was going on to achieve this balance. And so everything was about that. But we do see that expressed both mathematically and geometrically within the earthworks.
And that's overlooked, I'm sure, by, academia, isn't it?
Well, it is. And then, of course, the foot. But there was something called the Olympic foot, and it was identical. And I just don't think you could get 666, 1080, and 555
by chance.
Again, by chance. How could that possibly happen? That it just so happens to match up with the Amorites' numerological codex of Gematria? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
For people that think well, that's all long gone, it's really not. The Washington Monument, which is the Masons, built that and still use this numerology. The Washington Monument is 555 feet in height.
Interesting.
Which times 12 is 6,666, I believe. It's 666 is in that number, though, times the 12. Well, why would they do that? Well, who was Washington? Because he was the guy that had the perfect balance. He could have been emperor, but he didn't. And so they symbolize Washington as the 555, as the yin-yang, this perfect balance. So that numerology is in that monument, but people don't realize that. They don't promote it or anything. But if you look at it and see, what it is and who it represented, it'd be like, oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
There's a lot of sacred geometry and, the pyramids, and it goes on, but people generally aren't aware of that. Willie, did you have a question from a caller?
Well, yeah, I do have an email question from our friend Dave in Daytona Beach.
Oh, okay.
We haven't heard from him lately, but he emails us fairly frequently. But first, I do want to mention, though, Fritz, that we are running short on time here. We only got about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Okay, I'll keep this a short answer.
Probably will be, but going back to the mounds, Dave wants to know, have you or anybody ever done ground sounding radar on any of these mounds?
No, but that is in the future.
Oh, great.
And
all right.
I personally would never dig into a burial mound.
Yeah.
I know you're very much against that.
I would do a sound sensor and see if we could actually measure the skeletal remains.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
In doing so.
Least amount of harm.
Right. Exactly.
No harm, really.
No.
All right, then.
No, it would be bad mojo to stick a spade in
I
any kind
agree
of
with you.
ancient burial.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, then, given that these are the Amorites, how is it that they're related to the Sioux, the Cherokee, the Ojibwa, and the Iroquois?
Well, I'm going to have to make this a quick answer, too.
Okay.
Actually, those people have roots in what people call the Maritime Archaic. They had circumnavigated the world, the whole world, around 7,000 BC.
Oh.
That is their origin. They are probably the ones that tipped off the Amorites with the copper being over here. But they also had their roots with the Cro-Magnon race. So in the book, I differentiate between the origins of the Sioux, the Cherokee, and Iroquois, who actually were one group at one time and split about 1500 BC. The Hopewell in the Ohio Valley, those are Sioux. The Cherokee were part of that. The Iroquois in the north were part of that whole mound building. So I don't want to say it's all white people that came here. That was a small contingent of who they call the Adena. But the Sioux, the Cherokee, the Iroquois were equally as large, equally involved in burial mounds all across the country, in your neck of the woods as well. And so it's like a two-pronged story. You know, it's a little more exciting talking about the Amorites, but there's a whole front of the book. If I had to do it over again, it would have been 2 books, which makes it such a great value because you're really getting 2 books in one. So the whole front end is the Maritime Archaic, and then we follow that up with the who the archaeologists call the Adena, and who I'm calling the Amorites from the biblical land. So that's 2 stories.
You know, another thing too, that Beringia theory, Beringia, however you say it, coming over the Strait of, what is it? I forgot the name.
Alaska.
Thank you. Yeah. I do feel that there were some Asians that did come that way, but not everybody in the Northwest and in the Northeast and across Canada, they're not all related. And they don't want to make that distinction. Not everyone has this, the Ainu DNA, which is Japanese origin, right? Not everybody has it.
Right, and actually it was the Anu that is associated more so with the Maritime Archaic, and the Anu were more, they had more of that Northern European stock in them. And some of the oldest burials in California are not on the mainland, they're on the Channel Islands. So that in itself says that this was a maritime people. They were way out to sea.
Yeah.
That's how they were making a living. The oldest graves in the East Coast, around Labrador, we have stone mounds that are dating around 7,000 BC, again, associated with the maritime people. So not everybody came to Beringia. There were this maritime people that came here on boats. And so I like to show artifacts that are identical on the West Coast as the East Coast.
That's
from
hard
about the same time. And the only way that could happen is coming over from both sides of both the Pacific and the Atlantic.
Rather than migration, then, you think they came from both sides?
Right. I don't think they went from west to east. I think they came from the Atlantic, from northern Europe, and then there was some others that were coming from the Japanese islands, the Kurilian Islands, and then around the Aleutians, and then down the Pacific coast. But the foremost expert on ancient Europe is a lady called Marija Gimbutas, and she said that this is how it happened, that these people had circumnavigated the globe. They had come to North America from both sides. And the skeletal material, the burial types, all match up. The artifacts, it's an identical material culture on the West Coast and the East Coast, and we're talking 5,000 BC. Kennewick Man was one of these people.
Oh.
And if you look at Kennewick Man in the context of being more of an archaic, upper Paleolithic type skull, if you look at him, protruding brow ridge, sloping skull, and that's what we're going to find as far as the skeletal remains, more so even with the Maritime Archaic than the later Amorites that came over here. So again, we can look at the skulls and they'll tell the story.
The dating of the skulls, then, well, I guess we're going to have to go. We're just running out of time, Fritz.
We're right up against the time. But, Fritz, do you want to give out any websites where people can buy your books or all that kind of stuff?
Websites, if you look up Giants, that's probably you're going to run into me. Giant Human Skeletons, Nephilim Chronicles. I got a couple blogs that I run out there. But the book says Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. Just go to Amazon. And then the travel guide, 222 mounds and earthworks. The only other guide out there has about 70. I always tell people if you buy that other guide, for every mound you see, you'll pass by 2. All your paranormal people, I'm on Facebook, just under Fritz Zimmerman. really interested in hearing some groups and maybe going to the Stone Chambers out in your area, or if there's anybody listening in.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Fritz?
Contact me.
Oh, okay.
We lost you for a second there. Okay. Okay, well, Fritz, we thank you very much for joining us on Spirit Radio, and happy holidays to you.
Great information.
Good night, and, Merry
Thank
Christmas
you.
to everyone.
And you as well. Thank you, Fritz.
Okay,
right.
thank you,
Thank you.
Fritz.
Bye-bye.
Good night. And that is it. Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. We will see you in 2 weeks.
In a couple of weeks. So good night, everyone, and thanks for listening.
Merry Christmas.